Welcome to today's edition of the IntoTexas AI Podcast. It's your look at AI news and trends impacting Texas. I'm your host, Shannon Belew. Let's get started. Today, we're going deeper into a critical shift in the workforce, the rise of AI native talent, and the growing tension that comes along with it. Because here's the twist. The same generation that grew up with AI and is growing up with AI is also starting to push back against it. And for a state like Texas, this creates a real challenge. Let's recap the rise of AI native talent. So let's start with the foundation. If you're not familiar with the term AI native talent, today, we're defining it as those employees within an organization who intuitively integrate AI into their daily workflows. They're treating AI agents really as partners rather than tools. And these employees tend to use AI to amplify output rather than doing those rote tasks themselves. They have a true AI first mindset. It's not just seen as a technical skill. AI native employees really embrace this mind shift of leverage over tasks. And instead of asking, what do I need to complete? They tend to ask, what should I do? What should my agent handle? And what should we do together? And we at IntoTexas believe this is a critical part of the decision tree when you start role mapping for an organization. So again, another reason why AI native talent that thinks like this is so critical to an organization that's reprioritizing and focusing on AI. So when we talk again about AI native talent, they really start with AI in order to solve their problems. They automate by default and they think in systems, not just tasks, as we've mentioned. And truly, they operate with speed that traditional organizations struggle to match. That's a powerful mindset. And it's often why companies who are prioritizing AI see this type of worker as a competitive advantage. But that's really just the first of the story. Let's talk about the shift, Gen Z's growing AI anxiety. So, in a recent survey, we're starting to see a different trend emerge. If you think about it, the youngest part of our current workforce is Generation Z, Gen Z. This is a generation that has truly never worked in a world without AI tools. Now, keep in mind, just to define everything properly, the next generation, Alpha, those are the ones that were born between 2010 and 2025, just last year. Hard to believe. They will grow up, Gen Alpha, that is, will grow up to be the truly first real native AI generation, and not just in the workforce, but their entire lives, right? They won't have lived without AI in their world. But typically, that generation isn't going to graduate college and enter the workforce until the early 2030s, 2032, 2033. So Gen Z is really the first generation of native AI workers. And, here's the thing. A growing number of these Gen Z workers are starting to pull back on AI. And it's not because they don't understand it, but maybe it's because they understand it a little too well. They see that entry-level jobs are being automated using AI. They feel like there are fewer traditional career pathways than what their parents and grandparents had. And they see companies hiring fewer junior employees because, again, AI is being used to handle a lot of those entry-level junior roles. And look, like the rest of us, they see the headlines. It's dominated by layoffs that are tied to AI investments and restructuring. So, while Gen Z workforce is truly AI native, they're also asking themselves, is this technology eliminating the very roles that we were supposed to start in? And that makes for real tension. In fact, this goes back to the survey I mentioned a moment ago. This was a survey done by a company, Workplace Intelligence and Writer. That's a generative AI company based in San Francisco. And in their survey, they found that 44%, just under half of Gen Z workers surveyed, admitted that they have actively tried to undermine or sabotage their company's AI strategies. I mean, that's incredible if you think about that many Gen Z workers who are purposefully trying to interfere and disrupt forward progress with AI at their companies. Why? Well, the survey found that roughly 30% of them fear that AI will take their jobs. Back to what we said before, they're reading their headlines. They're trying to get roles and being rejected or not finding them out there. And then there's another group of them, roughly about 26%, again, all from the same survey, that feel that AI is diminishing their value of creativity. And this stems from a term, FOBO, fear of being obsolete. It's real. So let's talk about those methods of sabotage. They found that employees are intentionally producing lower quality work with AI. They're entering proprietary information into public tools to break them, or they're just flat out refusing to adopt the AI tools. And this is kind of interesting to me because I get why they feel this way. We all feel that way to an extent, I think. But this resistance comes at a time when other surveys indicate that 60% of C-suite executives are making the choices to lay off staff that are not adopting AI. And so this is creating a massive disconnect in the workplace right now because you have the companies who need this true AI native talent that's not afraid to use it, who understand how to maximize use of the technology. And then you've got that very generation that's saying, where's our place in the work world now because of AI? So this generation, what does it all mean? Like when we think about it, right? Well, again, this generation is just increasingly wary of AI's impact on their future. That's what it all boils down to. And when we think about, again, the companies that are struggling to adopt it, they need to be connecting these two more than ever. And then this brings us to our favorite topic, Texas. So why this matters for the Lone Star State. You know that cities like Austin and Dallas have become magnets for Gen Z talent. They're moving here because of the tech jobs, because of the startup ecosystems that exist, especially in Austin, but also in Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then there's much lower cost of living here compared to the East Coast, New York, West Coast, Silicon Valley. And at the same time, as we talk about a good bit on this podcast, Texas is rapidly positioning itself as a leader in the AI economy, from enterprise adoption to infrastructure investments to data centers and applied AI across multiple industries. Texas companies are moving aggressively. So this creates an interesting dynamic, right? We've got the Gen Z talent who's flocking to Texas. And then we've got companies across the state who are really investing in AI and wanting to move forward with that. So how do you deal with that when there's this growing fear, again, inside of the same workforce about being displaced? For Texas companies, this isn't just a talent issue. Perhaps it's a trust issue. The real risk, talent underutilization. If this tension isn't addressed, here's what potentially happens. Companies don't just lose Gen Z talent, right? They lose their full potential. And you'll start to see an underuse of AI tools internally. You'll see more hesitation to innovate at the edge. And you'll see employees holding back instead of pushing forward. And that means that you're going to have a culture where AI is seen as a threat instead of a multiplier. That's dangerous because the advantage of AI native talent isn't just skill, it's confidence. And once that confidence is replaced with caution, you don't get transformation, you get incremental change. What companies in Texas must do? Well, especially for AI tech hubs like Dallas and Austin, How do they bring that skeptical Gen Z on board? Well, at IntoTexas, we certainly believe that there are three critical moves. First, it's reframing AI as career acceleration, not replacements. And that doesn't just mean that you say that to get them in the door and then they discover that, okay, nothing has really changed, right? You really have to believe that. And companies need to clearly show how AI is expanding opportunity. We've talked in the past that, yes, there are entry level roles that may no longer exist, but that role changes. It evolves into a different type of role. So the person, that human, is still needed, but it's a slightly different version of the role they may have done before. Again, it's moving to a lot of contextual type roles. Matter of fact, I just saw a job opening just yesterday where they're looking for what was previously probably a junior data analyst type position. But now what they're asking for is someone who can work with AI technology to do the research for getting all of that data, what the human would normally have done, that junior role would normally have done. But then they're up leveling the human part of the responsibility to say, okay, now put all of that information into context, talk with our customers, bring that type of data into the mix in order to help form a very strategic position about where we should go, where we should invest as a company. And I think you're going to see more of these roles. So, again, as a company, it's helping to understand that you're not being replaced. The role that you thought you were going to have is just evolving. The second thing is you need to also show that this is creating faster skill progression and showing how these AI native employees can move up, not out, but up, right? And again, this goes back to their fears. What is their future in the workplace if they don't think there's a progressive career path? Well, again, understanding how your organization evolves in its entirety as part of your AI strategy, that's part of what gives clear, transparent communication and confidence to this next generation of workers that there's a place for them. And that does lead to our second point, which is building truly transparent AI strategies, because we know silence creates fear and leaders need to communicate where AI is being deployed. Again, back to what roles will change and how, and where they're creating new opportunities. And if employees don't hear it from leadership, they'll assume the worst. Third, and I think this is really important too, it's giving that Generation Z ownership of AI transformation. Now, this is kind of an important point because at IntoTexas, we talk a lot about the critical need to have a top-down AI strategy that the CEO owns. We absolutely believe that. Again, you have to, as the leader of your organization, you have to understand what that strategy looks like, how you're deploying it over time, and where you're going to start to see results and returns for those investments that you're being made. So that doesn't change. However, when you think about the opportunity to build enthusiasm, to build a sense of collaboration, this is where you can use those AI native workers to really start to own that, to help other employees, no matter what ages or generation they're from, but to help them get more comfortable with it, right? And this is where you'll see a lot of times where a Gen Z worker just coming in, maybe it's even an intern for their first time, right? Give them an opportunity to really own an AI project. And that gives them a sense of responsibility. It starts to build trust with the worker and the organization and the leadership. And it's going to help accelerate your potential success rate in your pilots and being able to then scale them back to getting those bigger returns, right? So empower them to redesign workflows, put them in positions where they shape how the work gets done. Because when people help build the future, they're less afraid of it. And here's the bigger opportunity for Texas. If Texas gets this right, it doesn't just adopt AI faster. It becomes the place where AI native work culture is defined and accelerates. It's a place where we're not just attracting talent, but talent is being activated and used at its full capacity. It allows companies to move faster because their workforce is aligned. And AI becomes a source of growth, not fear. That's a real advantage for a company. So, AI native talent is already reshaping the workforce. But in Texas, I think our next challenge is clear. It's turning that skepticism that some of those Gen Z workers have about AI into momentum, because the future won't be built by AI alone. It will be built by people who trust how to use it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the IntoTexas AI Podcast. If you want continued insights on how AI is reshaping Texas, then I invite you to listen, share, and of course, please subscribe. I'm Shannon Belew. I'll see you next time.